Welcome to Power Talks with Santosh Shah. In today's episode, we have with us His Excellency Scott H. DELISI, the Ambassador of the United States of America to Nepal. America and Nepal are located on the opposite side of the globe. Yet, in just 6 decades, Nepal has developed a strong bond of friendship with America. Welcome to the show, Your Excellency.
Thank you, Santosh. It's good to be here.
America's most wanted terrorist, Osama bin Laden, was found hiding in Pakistan. And South Asia has become a hub or area of high concentration of many terrorist organizations. In these circumstances, what are the changes we can expect on America's policy on South Asia?
I'm not sure we're going to see major changes, and here's why. We've been engaged in the fight against terrorism for many, many years, long before even 9/11 in the United States. The issue of international terrorism was of concern. It has been an issue in this region, and it's one that we've engaged the governments in this region on, again, for decades. The fact that Osama bin Laden was killed in Pakistan certainly was a significant moment. It changed many things. But at the end of the day, this isn't about either one man, nor is it about the continued search for other men, evil men, whose hearts are filled with hate. This is about changing societies, building societies that are resilient, building societies that can resist the pressures that lead individuals to go into terrorism and choose that course in life. I think that our continued engagement, and this is why I don't think it'll change, it's what we've been doing for some years. We're going to continue to do that, whether throughout this region. We'll continue to talk about the security environment. We'll continue to work with governments to try to address the terrorist threat that exists, but just as importantly, we will work with governments to build democratic societies.
I'd like to bring Nepal into this context. Recently, you mentioned that Al-Qaeda and others have their hideouts in Nepal. Can you elaborate on that, and how does your government plan to deal with this?
I always like to be respectful of my host, so don't take this wrong, but that's not quite what I've said. We've never said Al-Qaeda has hideouts here. What we have said, and I don't think Al-Qaeda has anything to do with Nepal. There are terrorist groups, though, in the region, in South Asia, that recognize, and I think that see in Nepal the potential. You've got a 1,600-kilometer open border with India. Security, as we know, and the Terai was devastated. The police presence was devastated during the insurgency. Immigration controls are lax, and there are always issues there. So as a result, there's many vulnerabilities that could be exploited by terrorists. And this is what we've spoken to, and we have said that publicly, that we are concerned that terrorist elements may seek to exploit Nepal's territory to the detriment of others in the region, and also, I would say, to the detriment of Nepal. No country wants their soil used as a base of operations or as an opportunity to attack someone else. So what are we doing about it? We're doing a lot of things, but primarily we are working very closely with the government. We reach out to them, but not just to the government of Nepal, but also to your other partners in the region. We want to have that same dialogue with India, for example, because this impinges upon their security as well. And we want to have a good conversation about how do we tighten security? How do we deal with these things? We work to strengthen the capabilities of the police. We work to strengthen intelligence capabilities so that we can all jointly identify the scope of the threat and then figure out how do we counter it. And the ideal thing, of course, is to deal with the problem before it becomes a problem. And that's what we're trying to do right now, in partnership with the government and other regional governments as well.
There's also an irony to it that Nepal's largest political party, CPN Maoist, still continue to be on the terrorist list of your government. Should the Maoists in Nepal worry about America's renewed efforts in dealing with terrorism?
Well, again, first of all, I'd say they aren't renewed efforts, they're ongoing efforts. And no, they shouldn't worry about it. This is a different context, and I think most folks would understand that. The Maoists are on the terrorism list because during the insurgency, and anyone in Nepal knows this, they committed some horrific acts of violence for which there's, no matter what your political beliefs, no matter what you're seeking to achieve, the use of violence in that fashion to achieve your goals is not acceptable. It's not acceptable to us in our society, and I don't think it's acceptable in most societies. They ended up on the list because of that. But things have changed. Times have changed. The insurgency is over. Now we see the Maoists entering into a political dialogue and into a process. We see the PLA in the cantonments. And we recognize that things are different. But we have made it very clear to the Maoists, and we've had that conversation about taking them off the list. And I think that it is something that they would welcome when that happens. But first, there are things that they have to do. We've had good discussions with them about what is expected of them. I think they understand that. I think we're seeing some progress in that direction. But the two most important things, if there are two things that will really help to move this process forward, the first, of course, goes to the peace process, completing the peace process. The final actions on integration and rehabilitation of the cadre, because as long as the Maoists essentially retain control of a private army, and I've told their chairman this, and I've told others in the party this, it is very hard for anyone to accept wholeheartedly their assertions that they are committed to a multi-party democratic system when they have a private army at their disposal. That's the first thing that has to happen, and I think we see progress in that regard, and I hope it's going to happen. The other thing that really will be important is their continued engagement in governance, as they are now. Their continued commitment to the creation of a democratic constitution. But there are differences we can talk about. The democratic constitution in North Korea, for example, that's a very different democratic constitution than the one that I hope that we'll see in Nepal. But if we see the Maoists continuing to engage in both these areas in real progress, then we can really begin, and I've told them this, then we can begin the discussions about that next phase in the relationship and look at what we can do about their status on the list.
The peace process is stuck over the issue of army integration. And now that UNMIN has left without witnessing the integration of both armies, what is your take on this?
To me, the peace process isn't stuck on this. It's slow on this. But I understand the frustration everyone feels, and I share it. Everybody would like to see this resolved much more quickly. I've been here 14 months, roughly. I think it's about 14 months. But I do know that in the time I've been here, I have seen progress on this issue of the peace process and on the issue of integration. I think the parties have all agreed. They recognize that it does have to happen. It's going to happen. Everybody has accepted that. I personally believe that the Maoists recognize that, yes, if they want to get a constitution, if they want to move forward, they will have to give up their cadre. I believe this. Maybe I'm wrong. I think that may be a painful choice for some in the party, but I think it's something that has to be done. And certainly we all in the international community, I think, would argue that this has to be done. Making those decisions up and sorting through the modalities, the numbers, and all of these questions is a tough issue for many. And I recognize that, but I would say to you that from our perspective, there's a difference between the issues of the Constitution, for example, because those go to the heart of democracy. Those go to defining what kind of nation you're going to be, and you need to fight for your democratic principles. The issue of how you integrate or rehabilitate the Maoists really isn't an issue of principle. It's an issue of, it's a process. Requires negotiation perhaps, but these aren't the issues that you fight and die for. Is it 8,000? Is it 7,000? Is it 9,000? These are numbers. Get it done. Move the country forward. Actually, there's probably been more progress since UNMIN left than in the 4 years leading up to that. And that's not a reflection on UNMIN, but it's just a change in political dynamic. I think there's some challenges there, but I think that they can be managed as well. I think the parties, if they have the political will, this can be done.
America has supported the peace process and constitution drafting of Nepal. Are you equally frustrated, like the common people of Nepal, that we are not achieving as much success in this venture as we had expected?
Yes, we're all frustrated, but I do see progress. And we see the issues on the Constitution have narrowed tremendously. Again, oftentimes these are not so much about the issues per se, but about the politics behind it and the struggle for political power. And we see that happen in many societies. When you think of what Nepal was 50 years ago, closed to the outside world, an absolute monarchy and all the rest. And today, the monarchy is gone. You're defining who you will be as a nation, how you will govern yourselves, how you will share power and resources, what you value. These are all tough issues, and you're doing it for your political leadership as well in a context that is totally alien. There's no more monarchy to blame or to support. They're all on their own, and they've all got to figure out how this works. So when you look at it in the broad context, you've done more in 2 decades than many countries have to deal with in 100 years or 150 years.
We have observed you as somebody who gets the thing done. While you're here for next 1 or 2 years, would you want to see the Constitution drafted and Army integrated and live peacefully?
I want to see it done this year. I want to see it done in the next few months because it's time to move forward. And it's only if these are completed that we can really work to move as a partner to help Nepal now move forward to realize its full potential. And I think there is tremendous potential here. We're even doing in the next few months. I say, let's get the political stuff out of the way so that we can focus on the real core issues of building the society, building a democracy, building and strengthening the economy. Because we've got a whole lot of young people here. And they need a future as well. And they need to have opportunities in their own country.
You mentioned about the vulnerability of Terai, and I would like to tell you that Terai has become a hideout sanctuary for Nepali and Indian criminals, and that may apply to several terror outfits as well. But the young people of Terai, through my own interactions with them, they are prepared. They are ready to protect their own homeland. Would you consider any serious youth empowerment plans for them so that they could be empowered to do it on their own?
First of all, I agree. We're very concerned about that security environment in the Terai, and we recognize that these criminal elements, that there definitely are those criminal elements, that they grow in an environment of instability and insecurity, and that they pose a threat. They pose a threat to the society, to the values of the society. And you're right as well, that those elements engage in smuggling and doing this, doing that. A terrorist group could just as equally partner with them or draw upon their skills, such as they are, unfortunate skills, to advance their own agenda. So we're concerned about that too. In terms of empowering the young people, if you're talking about empowering them in a sense as a militia or as a security force, no, we haven't envisioned that. And to me, there's already 3 security forces in Nepal, and it's not about creating even more, all competing for resources and roles and training and power and all. It's helping the forces that exist to do their jobs effectively. Many of our development programs through USAID are also directed at helping communities and police to be able to work comprehensively together to make it a better environment. If you're talking about empowering the youth of the Terai to give them alternatives to a life of crime or violence, absolutely we're committed to doing that. And many of our resources and our development programs are directed towards the Terai, they're directed towards youth.
The security mechanism which we have in the current state in Terai is near to a collapse. The presence of government, law and order is weakening day by day. Terai used to be a green belt for growing vegetables and food. Now they're growing cannabis and opium. Before Terai becomes a reason of warlords like in Afghanistan, can we not look into the proverb, prevention is better than cure, for this neglected reason?
I think we would always argue that prevention is better than cure. And it's, this issue of drugs that you raised, Santosh, is something that I've been hearing more and more about since I've been here as well. On my first trip to the Terai about a year ago, when I was in Birganj, I started to hear about it. I have heard about it as I have traveled in other parts of the Terai, and it is an issue of concern to us. It is not yet a primary focus for us, or for any donor, and nor is it for the government, but I think that we need to be looking at this much more closely, to be honest. And I've talked with a lot of young people who are working in the Terai, many of whom are trying to address this issue, and trying to get farmers to redirect their efforts and their resources, but it's also, you've got to find that combination of alternatives and enforcement of the laws as well. We're probably making progress that can move towards enforcement. We're working with the police and all the rest, all the security establishment. But we really do need to do a better job still of empowering the people with alternatives. And also, though, it seems to me it's giving them a stake in their nation. People who really believe in their country, who want Nepal to believe in Nepal and want it to prosper, aren't going to want to produce drugs. But right now, again, until the government is able to really define what it is to be a Nepali in this new nation that you're building, I think it's harder to establish that sense of ownership, and that's part of the process too.
You have already taken a major step by forming Nepal's Youth Advisory Council for the U.S. Embassy. How do you see this small but very promising step translating into several success stories in the future for Nepal?
What we recognized is, again, this is a very young country. 75% of the population under the age of 35 or 72%. I remind folks, for every old man like me running around, there's 3 like you, 3 young people there.
You come up with the young ideas.
Yeah. Well, thanks. So when we looked at this, we realized if we really want to make a difference in Nepal as a partner and as a friend, we need to understand, and we need to understand the young people as well. We need to know what their concerns are, what their fears are, what their hopes are, how they see their nation, because this is their nation and they will shape it. Inevitably, they will have to shape this future. So we decided we'd reach out to them so that we could hear from them, and we brought together a group that we identified with the help of many, many partners. And this is a group that includes Dalit and Brahmin, Janjati, Chetri. We've got Muslim, Buddhist, Christian, Hindu, people from Solukhumbu and Kalali and Japa and the valley and throughout the country.
From all over Nepal.
And we wanted to sit with them and we wanted to hear from them. And that was important for us, but I think there was another benefit there. It's great for us to learn from them, and it's nice maybe for some of them to have this conversation with the American embassy. Everyone wants to be listened to. We're finding that as young Nepalis, they had many things in common that transcended the boundaries that exist between caste and community and ethnicity and linguistics. They said, but we're all Nepalis. Now, the biggest challenge for them, and I've asked them to, when we meet again, and we do, this is not a one-time thing for us, this is an ongoing engagement, I've asked them to tell us, what does it mean to be a Nepali today? It's no longer a Hindu kingdom, this is a new country. They talked a great deal about the richness of Nepal's ethnicity and multicultural society, and that's a wonderful thing. But I asked them, what is it, you talk about all these different ethnic groups, so what is it that unites you as young Nepalis today? And I think as they identify that, it is out of that we're going to start to see the success stories and that this country will grow and prosper and build. And I'm looking forward, if we can be a small part of that, of encouraging that conversation amongst the youth across these lines.
Nepal and the U.S. recently signed the TIFA agreement, Trade and Investment Framework Agreement. What can Nepal expect from this?
What I hope we'll see coming from this is a real surge in the economic partnerships, the commercial partnerships between our two countries. It's not going to happen overnight. But the TIFA itself provides, as it says, it's a framework agreement. It provides that the basis for us to engage with each other, a mechanism for us to resolve issues of concern, to talk about how we build both a trade and investment relationship. And I think that this is critically important to the future of Nepal. We've got to build that economy. We've got to create opportunities for the youth. We have to build for the future, and I'd like to see us do that. And I believe the time is right. I think that many people, when they look at Nepal, still think of it as they did 10 years ago. They still think of the country in insurgency and the Maoists with kukris in their teeth and blood being spilled. That's not the Nepal of today. The narrative has changed. There are challenges ahead, yes, but there is potential for growth. There are American companies who are very quietly doing business here already and who are doing well, who are making money. There are other people, Nepali companies, that are doing well, that are making money. There are opportunities for growth. You are positioned between two of the largest economies in the world, fastest growing economies in the world. India and China. I've recently traveled to New Delhi, and I talked to American businesses with the American Chamber of Commerce. And I'm very pleased because later this month, we've got a good trade delegation coming up from the American Chamber in New Delhi. And I want them to see Nepal with their own eyes. I want them to not listen to what the media has to say, with all due respect. I want them to see it for themselves. I think that this is a formula for seeing Nepal also do well and to consolidate the democratic gains that you are going to make by having a prosperous economy that is the framework, or that provides the undergrid for all of this.
During the last year, you have extensively focused on the risk of natural disaster in Nepal, a subject that Nepal government seems to be a bit relaxed about. What are your assessments on the natural disaster that could be potentially in pipeline for Nepal?
I believe there is that opportunity to change from being a country with Japan-sized earthquakes, but Haiti's infrastructure, and move it along that continuum towards becoming a Santiago, where you can, or Chile, where you can experience a major quake and only have 70 people die. That was a real success for Chile. It's going to require huge work. And right now, the risks that Nepal faces are tremendous. I think we've begun to change the equation, but we've only nudged the country along the continuum. I welcome the government's new focus and the leadership they've shown, and they were leaders in a major international symposium we held here in February. They came to Washington to help us participate in a major event there in April. And the messages, the most fundamental, most important message of all of this is, don't wait until hundreds of thousands of people die to say we have to do something.
At the last minute.
We deal with it now. Preparedness is the key, and with preparedness we can begin to change that equation, and I think the government is committed to doing that, and we're now doing all sorts of things. Wonderful program next week. We're sitting down, the head of the U.S. Marine Force Pacific will be here. We will sit with the Nepal Army and do a tabletop exercise to validate a concept of operations for disaster response that we have worked on with them. We've got to remain engaged and sustain this commitment for the next 10, 20 years, for however long we have.
Women trafficking is another serious issue that Nepal has to deal with on a daily basis. And the support of your people and your government in dealing with anti-trafficking programs are incredible. They're very supportive of that. Yet, women trafficking is becoming more widespread, and the whole process is becoming more complex. Can we look at upgrading some of the programs that you're supporting and also focus more on the preventive methods that could probably perfectly work?
We've been working on this since the mid-1990s at least. So this is not just because CNN has decided to fight modern-day slavery, but I applaud CNN for doing that. And that's been a cause of theirs over the past year. And it was wonderful to see Anuradha Kerala become the CNN Hero of the Year. That's great. And we've supported Mighty Nepal, and we've given them grants, and we'll continue to support organizations like that. But this has to be a sustained effort. We believe you've got to do all three Ps, if you will. You have to do prevention, you have to do prosecution, and you have to do protection as well for those who have been trafficked. And we're trying to work in all three of those areas. And I will say that we've just granted, in fact, the Asia Foundation a $6.8 million award to further advance our anti-trafficking programs. We are working very, very closely with the government of Nepal on every level. I've reached out, I've talked with the Attorney General, because it's important to make the prosecution work effectively as well. And the prevention element is also an important one. For example, the American Himalayan Foundation is doing a good program here, and we're going to be supporting that as well through USAID. And it's a program to keep girls in school, because girls who are in school, who have other opportunities, who are given a good education, are able to resist those temptations and the stories and the lies that they're told that bring them into this process. So absolutely, we are committed to working on all the dimensions of this problem. It's a multidimensional challenge, and we have to approach it multidimensionally as well. We will continue to bring those resources, and I can tell you, for Secretary Clinton, for President Obama, personally, this is an issue that they care about. And for me, it's an issue that I care about. I've got a daughter. I've got a granddaughter. If you care about your kids, if we care about the women in our lives that matter, we're going to fight this. And it's not always just women who are trafficked either. We need to fight this issue. And I would just say we need to fight it not only across the border when the women or girls are trafficked to a brothel in India or into domestic servitude in the Middle East, but also in Nepal. And I challenge my colleagues here to be as concerned about the massage parlors and the dance bars and the cabin restaurants as they are about a girl who's sold to a brothel in Bombay.
Most of the time they're minors.
Absolutely. No, this is a huge problem, and I know that for the leadership in my government, it's not just, it's an important cause, but they feel this personally, morally, this is wrong. And I agree, and this is why we fight it.
As the ambassador of the United States of America to Nepal, you have taken some very serious issues: women trafficking, border security, natural disasters, peace process, army integration, and many. When you complete your tenure next year, which of these you would like to see completed and which ones you're not very sure of?
I'm hoping that I'll still be here for 2. But having said that, at the end of my tenure, what I would love to see, I would love to see the peace process completed, absolutely. And I'd like to see Nepal with a truly democratic constitution that the people are proud of. Those would be 2 things that would matter very much to me. I would, to be honest, I would love to see the Peace Corps back in Nepal. And I think that it's been a wonderful partnership. It's a great country for Peace Corps to work in, where we've had a long, enduring partnership, and I'd like to see that partnership restored. I think Nepal could use it. I think our volunteers would welcome the opportunity, and I think we could make a difference.
That was a very successful program.
It really was. So that's another thing that I would like to see happen. Certainly, on the issue of trafficking, we would like to see it stopped.
Totally, completely.
Totally, completely. I don't know that that's realistic in the world, but we have to fight towards the goals. Sometimes they may be difficult, they may be a dream, but I think we have to fight towards that. The thing is, Santosh, I care about all these issues. I think on disaster risk reduction, we have to continue to make progress. There is no excuse for not making progress, and we fail. And I think the government fails. I think it fails its people. I think we fail as partners if we don't push forward. But the one thing that we haven't talked about, though, that I would like to see progress on, and that, again, we touched on the need for building that sense of engagement and commitment for the youth, giving them an opportunity for the future. Every morning when I go to the embassy, I see the queues outside the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
For the passports. For
the passports, the visas. You can't build an economy that's sustainable on exporting your kids or on customs revenues. We need to deepen and broaden the economy. We need to build the private sector. Our development programs are great, but development by itself doesn't create jobs, but the private sector can. We need to strengthen that private sector. We need to see these jobs created, and I think the potential is there for that to happen in Nepal today. And that's the other thing I'd like to contribute to, at least to some extent. We recognize there are constraints, the energy issue, for example, and I think it's vitally important that we help to bring about a resolution to the energy crisis. We're trying to bring in U.S. companies. We had an energy roundtable when I was in Washington with your government's delegation. We're working hard on that, not just energy for energy's sake, but so that it can be an engine for growth for this economy. And if we can help with that as well, that also, if the economy starts to work, then you also get at issues of trafficking. You have more resources to put into education, into disaster risk reduction, into all of these other things. So that economic issue is increasingly a focus for our embassy, and I think it'll be a very strong focus for me in the next 2 years that I'm here.
Your Excellency, it was wonderful having you on Power Talks.
Thank you, Santosh. It was my pleasure to be with you today. Thank you.
Thank you for being with us. We'll be back next week at the same time. Until then, good luck and goodbye.